So Anthony Kennedy is retiring. He, of course, is conservative justice. He's been in the court for decades. And he is, well, he's a swing vote. So, yes, he's a conservative justice, but he's been a swing vote on many decisions. He's also voted in favor of corporations almost all the time. So that can kind of show you where he's been on the scale, since this has been the most conservative Supreme Court I think we've ever had. Nonetheless, he has made some rulings that were positive. So, and this can, like I said, considered a swing vote on things like abortion and even the ACA. Now, it came as a bit of a shock, his retirement, of course. But I think what might be more shocking than his announcement is the reasons that might be underlying that announcement. Now, the New York Times actually had a really great article on what one of those reasons might actually be. Now, they explain that in subtle and not so subtle ways, the White House had waged a quiet campaign to ensure that Mr. Trump had had a second opportunity in his administration's first 18 months to fulfill one of their campaign promises. Now, what was one of those campaign promises? To stack the Supreme Court with conservatives so that conservative ideology would be protected for decades. Now, that, of course, would mean disaster for things like gay rights and even abortion. And now there's talk, of course, about the possibility of another challenge to Roe v. Wade. Well, great. Now, of course, in order to do that, you would have to have someone resign. Now, right now, the court is 5-4. So the last Supreme Court justice that died, Antonin Scalia, was replaced by Neil Gorsuch, so that kept the court 5-4 in favor of the conservatives. Now, Kennedy, also a conservative, would be replaced, and the court would still end up being 5-4. Now, the difference is that Kennedy, while yes, again, conservative, voted in favor of corporations, ruled in favor of corporations almost 100% of the time, if not 100% of the time, was a swing vote on certain social issues, for example, gay marriage. But if Trump gets his pick, he's going to pick somebody who's incredibly conservative on those social issues as well, which spells disaster for some of those other rulings. Now, in order to do that, as I said before, Kennedy resigned. Somebody who was in that vein, a swing vote or a liberal, would have to resign. Well, of course, the liberals, none of them are going to resign or retire. Justice Ginsburg is holding on for dear freaking life. And so she's like, no, I'm not going to retire. You're going to have to drag me out of here in a body bag. Or, as some liberals have suggested, just prop her up like Weekend at Bernie's until the liberal gets or progressive gets elected. I know it's sad to joke about that, but that's where we're at. It's kind of a macabre sense of humor. But anyway, now, in order to get Kennedy to resign, of course, you would have to have some pressure, right? Well, how would you pressure somebody like Kennedy? Well, it turns out, if you have a connection, that helps. Now, turns out they do have a connection. One person who knows both men remarked on the affinity between Mr. Trump and Justice Kennedy, which is not obvious at first glance. Justice Kennedy is bookish and abstract, while Mr. Trump is earthy and direct. I've never heard him described as earthy. Okay, then. But they had a connection. One Mr. Trump was quick to note in the moments after his first address to Congress in February of 2017. As he made his way out of the chamber, Mr. Trump paused to chat with the justice. He said, quote, "Say hello to your boy. Special guy." Uh-oh. Special guy. Well, here we go. Not only that, but this conversation continued with Kennedy saying, "Your kids have been very nice to him." Well, who? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. They said they love him, and they love him in New York City. He's a great guy. Uh-oh. Now, that's a little odd. So who's he referring to? Well, the New York Times explains that Mr. Trump was referring to Justice Kennedy's son, Justin Kennedy. Now, Kennedy, the junior, spent more than a decade at Deutsche Bank, eventually rising to become the bank's global head of real estate and capital markets. Do you see where this is going? Oh, we're the head of real estate and capital markets in New York City. Well, President Trump was a real estate developer before he became president and reality show host. Oh, look at that. It turns out they worked together. During Mr. Kennedy's tenure, Deutsche Bank became Trump's most important lender, dispensing well over $1 billion in loans to him for the renovation and construction of skyscrapers in New York and Chicago, at a time other mainstream banks were wary of doing business with him because of his troubled business history. They added, Justin Kennedy may have been more responsible than anyone else for saving the Trump family business during the darkest days of the Great Recession. So not only did they loan him $1 billion in loans for renovation and construction, they may actually save the Trump business and the Trump brand. No wonder they have such nice things to say about each other, Trump and Kennedy. Not only that, but Trump's praise of the senior Kennedy was also part of a campaign to ensure him that his judicial legacy would be in good hands should he step down at the end of the court's term that ended this week. Now, that is very important. The term of the court ended. And so he will be stepping down in July, at the end of July. So there's a midterm coming up, however. And that's interesting timing. So originally, I'll wait till after the midterm. So that the voters can have a say in whether or not they want Trump to pick a certain kind of justice. Well, it appears the voters are not going to have a say. He's not going to wait till the midterms because he is stepping down at the end of his term. Great. So, now, let me get into the other factors here that could be influential. For example, Donald Trump, in news that is not widely well known, but when he became president, he got the ability to appoint other justices. Now, that gets little fanfare in the news, but actually it can be very important filling district court judge positions. Now, it turns out that after Trump became president, he began appointing law clerks that had worked under Kennedy. For example, Judges Stephanos Bibas and Michael Scudder, both of whom have been confirmed, and Eric Murphy, the Ohio Solicitor General, whom Mr. Trump nominated into the Sixth Circuit this month. They were all Kennedy clerks. So they followed in the mold of Kennedy. At least they followed Kennedy. And there was a connection there. Furthermore, Judge Brett M. Kavanaugh, the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit Judge, and Judge Raymond M. Kethledge of the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit in Cincinnati, are also former Kennedy clerks and are on the list to replace Kennedy. Oh, no, don't worry about it. Step down now and, do it before the midterms where it's easy to replace you, and we can replace you with clerks that you know. So your legacy is secure. So that's what's going on. I see. Now, of course, Kavanaugh is actually incredibly conservative on social issues as well. For example, Kavanaugh in 2017 was one of three dissenting judges on a decision that allowed an immigrant teenager to get an abortion. Now, she was pregnant, she was an immigrant, and she wanted to seek an abortion. Ultimately, she was able to. However, Kavanaugh was one of the judges that dissented, and he said the majority had, quote, badly erred in this case and created a new right for undocumented immigrant minors in custody to, quote, immediate abortion on demand. Well, now, wait a minute. Do you hate anchor babies or do you love anchor babies? I mean, that's kind of what that ruling was about, strangely enough. But he said, no, I'm very, very pro-life. So I'm going to have this immigrant teenager, this undocumented immigrant, get born on American soil, which would have made that immigrant child a citizen. Okay, well, there you go. Now, the overall point and context that I bring that case up in is that he is stringently pro-life, which could cause issues if a challenge to vote Roe v. Wade ever comes up to the Supreme Court. And that could take a few years. So, look, those are just a couple of replacements for Kennedy. Those two specifically were law clerks to Kennedy, and a way to show Kennedy that, hey, don't worry, your legacy's safe. We have your former clerks. But, look, no matter who Trump chooses out of this list of at least 25 potential justices, it could spell disaster for decades to come on gay rights and reproductive rights. And knowing that there's a possibility that Kennedy did this on purpose and decided, oh, no, I'm not going to wait till the midterm. And we're going to do it now. So here's a big gift to Donald Trump, who's good to my boy. My boy gave him $1 billion in loans. Well, that's a pretty damning legacy to leave, if that's the case. But if it's true, then, look, I guess we know what kind of person Anthony Kennedy is. We know that he's more loyal to people than he is the law, than he is to even his previous decisions, which somebody who follows him will very likely overturn. But I guess all in the name of friendship and money. At least now we know. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.